Hello, everyone. Welcome again to one more session of the Best Virtual Summit, the first panel discussion. Today, we will be discussing about European universities beyond the pandemic. How is COVID-19 crisis affecting European universities, and what is the future for higher education in Europe? With us, we have Frank from EIT InnoEnergy, Fredrik Georgsson, who is part of the board of directors of SEFI, and Professor Alfredo Soeiro, who you had the chance to meet earlier in his keynote about online assessment. So first, I'd like each of you to introduce a bit about your path and your work in engineering education and in education in general. And I would like to address one question to each of you. So to start with, Frank, um, tell us a bit about your work. And the question I have for you is, what was your organization's response to the COVID-19 crisis?
Okay, thank you. So my name is Frank Gielen, and I'm a professor of computer science in the University of Ghent in Belgium. And I'm also director of EIT InnoEnergy's education programs. And EIT InnoEnergy is one of the institutes of the EIT, specifically focusing on sustainable energy and the energy transition. We do this by a lot of things, investing in startups, doing projects with companies, but we also focus a lot on education, and we have 8 master programs in the various fields of sustainable energy, which are by design international, because those 8 master programs are organized with our 40 university partners and business schools. And so each student spends at least some time in 2 countries, sometimes in 3 countries. Now, those are not really your regular master programs. I tend to call them master programs on steroids, because they add a lot of things on top of a classical master program, in the sense that we have in each program we have a link with a business school to introduce innovation and entrepreneurship management. And then our pedagogical methodology is based on learning by doing, and meaning very active learning. So not always classroom learning, but mainly active learning, which means that we have a network of more than 500 companies and startups which have the best technology in energy. And our students are working with them on problems, solving real challenges, solving real problems. To give you an idea, last year our students made an island in Thailand completely energy independent as part of their main work in the courses. So this made it especially difficult for us to translate that into the more online versions which we were faced with the pandemic. And given the fact that InnoEnergy offers international programs to international students, we had to do a couple of things to deal with all of that. And the first thing we did is help the students, because a lot of the students that were in our programs were trapped in cities, in dorms or in apartments without too much connections to their families. So we made sure that from a financial point of view, and also from a social environment point of view, they were taken care of, and we have special programs put in place that they were safe, that they also got food in some cases, because in the very beginning of the pandemic, this was not always easy to solve. So that was our first concern. And then when we when this was taken care of, we also looked at our other stakeholders, which were mainly the universities and then the teaching staff in the universities. And we immediately made some measures which gave the teaching staff additional tools on top of what they had to do the online learning in what we called emergency mode. So emergency remote teaching, we pulled everything from the closet to help them. They already did a lot of things themselves. And then we also reached out to the university management, saying them, look guys, I mean, we're not sure that this is a one-time event. This is taking maybe much longer. It may repeat, we don't know. But since we don't know, we will kind of hope for the best and plan for the worst. But by planning for the worst, we really meant, let's see how in all those different learning activities we have, we can support you by doing an online or a mixed or a virtual or a hybrid version. And the key thing that we support them with is instructional design, because what we are convinced of in InnoEnergy is that good online or digital learning cannot happen without having some good design in usability and user experience. So InnoEnergy invested quite a lot in that and is still investing, so that even in case that the fall semester will be fully digitally delivered, it will be more than Zooming and MOOCing. So that's in short what we're doing, and I'm sure we come back on that.
Yes, thank you very much. Indeed, extreme times require important measures. And I will now move to Fredrik. Also, would like to hear a bit about your work. And then the question is about what response did you experience from your students to the situation?
Thank you. Yes, my name is Fredrik Georgsson, and I'm from University of Umeå, where I work as a quality developer, as it's called, at the university level. And it's a university with about 30,000 students and more than 150 programs at different levels with all faculties. Within engineering science, we have roughly 20 engineering programs within all fields or most fields of engineering. My background has taken me to be a board of director of SEFI, which is an engineering education association on the European level. And I also have a background in CDIO, which is an international framework for engineering education, where I've been the regional co-director for Europe for a couple of years. My research background is I'm a senior lecturer in computer science, and I've been the program director of the our software engineering program that we have in Umeå. And I've also been the faculty program director responsible for all the 20 engineering programs we have. So that's my background within engineering education. I am strongly convinced, and we will try to work really hard on the topic of a flexible curriculum. I hope that we can come back to in one way or another during the discussion. And of course, these are extraordinary times, and at least in Sweden and most of the world, we were tossed into the digitalization overnight. While stuff was happening around us. And of course, there were the immediate response from the student was to be worried. And they were mainly worried for practical stuff. Well, how will the assessment, how will the exam work now when I'm in the middle of a course, and will I pass or fail, or will my student loan expire to pay? All these practical matters floated around when we first went into this extraordinary period of time. But of course, this calmed down pretty quickly when the student realized, okay, this is going to work out. There will be a difference. I will do my attend my courses online instead of at campus, and so on and so forth. For a small group of students, or a large, depending on how you see it, of course, the going online meant that the courses that were taken at the moment, if they were taking a chemistry course with extensive lab work, that was difficult to manage, to really come up with good, acceptable solution during the circumstances that we have, and we're still working with that. Having the students come in very small groups and do their labs and so on and so forth. But overall, I would say that the spirit of the students rose pretty quickly when they realized, okay, this is not by definition the end of the world. We will sort of see this through. And it's amazing how you regularly hear reports from the different courses of the different programs that the students and the teachers pull together and work together to get through this, to find solutions, to find when stuff didn't work out as good as intended in the beginning, they together solved it and came up with a much better solution and stuff like that. So that's really encouraging to see that the students takes responsibility for their learning process and are aware that, okay, this is extraordinary times. We have to sort of pull together and pull through this.
Thank you very much, Fredrik. So now I'd like to hear from Professor Alfredo about a bit of his background and about which response did you experience from educators in the COVID-19 crisis.
Okay, good afternoon, and congratulations to BEST for this initiative and specifically this debate. We will have these points of view that are different. Myself, I've started working on online many years ago, and I was working with continuing education and lifelong learning, and then joined Eden. Eden is celebrating 30 years next year, so you see how long this has been. So personally, I've been involved in online teaching and let's say less formal activities of the university, like the lifelong learning and the professional development, for a long time. In particular, I think that what is important is that the participation in all these organizations, including BEST, it's very important to exchange ideas and to understand what other people are doing, why they are doing, what are their problems, etc. It's a very good form of learning, at least for me. I was pro-rector of the university for continuing education and with an emphasis on e-learning. And let me tell you that it's not very easy to create these transformations without some structural changes like what you have seen in the last months. This experience from educators was motivated by this exceptional situation where we were and we still are up to a certain point. And let me tell you that what I've seen, not only in my university and in my country and in other countries, was a very, how do I say, concerned attitude from teachers to start doing something they have never done, or most of them have never done before. And there were several initiatives, either from teachers' organizations or from educational associations like Eden, ICDE, EIDTU. EIDTU, for instance, is an association of distance teaching universities in Europe, very old, very experienced. They have good webinars. Eden is also the European Distance Education Network. It works for a long time. And they helped somehow those that were not helped, those educators that were not helped by their own institutions to address this challenge. Now, the issue that I've seen and that is a major concern for me is that most of the approaches from the educators was to transpose the face-to-face context to the online environment. And that's not how it works, because things are different. The pedagogy or the andragogy are different when you're teaching online. And therefore the learning, because the learning is also different. So you really have to have a certain how do I say, training to do this. I've seen lots of professors, some of my colleagues, that just pick up their materials, they put them on the learning platform like Moodle, and they said, this is it. You study. This is now how it works. So I was just reading a point from Pierre Dillenbourg. I don't know if you know, but he was the father, between commas, of MOOCs in Europe. He was the promoter of the first European MOOC summit, and he was fighting with Coursera and with other American organizations to have our own European. She managed to have the OpenEd up and other European initiatives. But Pierre Dillenbourg was mentioning the post-COVID problem, which is something that I have not seen, is the question of inequality. But it's not inequality of access in terms of quality of internet or computers and everything. It's the preparation of the educators. Most of the educators were not prepared to this challenge, and the time was not enough to prepare them. So, like I said, most of the educators just virtually transform their face-to-face classes into virtual classes. They recorded classes, etc. And they said, this is it. But it's not the same thing. And that, I think, was what happened. Most of them were not prepared, did not have time to prepare, and even with the good initiatives from many organizations, even national organizations or institutional initiatives, it was not enough. It's something that I think we'll address later when we discuss the future, and I'll come back to this.
Thank you very much, Frank.
Yes, I would like to comment on Alfredo's statements, because I really believe this is spot on in terms of online learning is not translating your classroom session into a Zoom session. And we should really stress this, because the big risk which I see is that now a lot of academics are saying, yes, we made a major step forward in moving from classroom to digital. And that's true. I mean, the effort has been tremendous. But this is not the end point, because while we as academics think we have made a major step forward, we should think about the students. And so we have started doing surveys with the students. What did they think about what happened in the last 3 months? How did they feel about the teaching and the learning? And it's clear that they don't have the same perception as we do. And it's exactly where this different way of working comes in. And so I'm sure we're going to talk more about this, but the risk is that by stopping here, you will give, I would say, food to the discussion which says, well, online learning can never be as good as classroom teaching. And that is simply not true, but you have to do it in the right way with trained faculty members and with support from a good staff. And if we have a huge opportunity now, but if we stop here, it will be gone. So, and we'll talk more later.
I also would like to comment on that. I think, like you said, it's spot on what Alfredo said. We also have to acknowledge that the difference in digital competence amongst the teachers are enormous, meaning that some are really doing good stuff, were doing good stuff before the COVID crisis, and some are not. They're just putting themselves in front of a camera and pressing record and then distributing the movie online, which we know is not a good way to do, to provide a good situation for learning. I had a discussion with the pedagogical unit at the university, and of course we had a constant development of the digital skills for online teaching among the staff. And I asked them, how big a step forward have we taken now during this last couple of, well, the months we've been doing this? And they estimated we've done a quantum leap of 3 to 4 years forward. And of course, it would be easy to just lean back and say, okay, now we've done our bit, we are ahead 3 to 4 years, but it doesn't work that way, because what we've done now, in general, there are of course exceptions of teachers that are exceptionally good at this, but in general, we learned the technological platforms. We will learn so how Zoom works. We will learn how the different tools work, and now it's time to start working on the pedagogical aspect of it. It's time to start working on how do we assess work online, because we see a lot of attempts to trying to take the exam situation where the students is locked up in a room, given a sheet of paper and asked to write everything they know on this piece of paper, and we spend a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to prevent students from cheating and stuff like that. But I think, and I'm extremely convinced that if the problem is that a student are allowed to Google, then we're asking the wrong question in our exams. And I think we really have to address this topic as well, regardless of Corona or digitalization or not. We really have to work on how we assess our students in general. The span is enormous between good and bad.
Thank you very much for all your input. That's indeed a very interesting topic, and we'll get back to it soon. In the meantime, I want to remind our audience that you can watch questions, you can ask questions in the live stream comment section, both in Facebook and YouTube. So feel free to drop your questions. We'll try to introduce them. And we have one question from the audience, which is, was there any cooperation between European universities in collectively fighting the pandemic? I don't know if any of you would like to answer on some specific thing.
Well, I can say something from InnoEnergy, but that's a small view of the world. So since we are a consortium of universities, they started to look at how they could work together with the pandemic. But in the first 3 months, I mean, everybody had so much work and focus to get things right at their own university that the collaboration work will now come in the long-term view. And certainly in the online learning and teaching, we have now universities which say, well, let's make a common virtual course with common learning activities so that each one can duplicate them, or at least that students can easily take one course from one university and one from another and still have their degree. But on the short term, I mean, it was survival and trying to get things right for graduation exams. That's it from my side.
So, Eugenia?
Yeah. Okay. Then we now change a bit the topic. I have a question for all of you, where input can start. Talking basically, we already have mentioned challenges in moving in facing this quite unique situation. So in the readiness of professors, like what would you think has been the biggest challenge to overcome in being suddenly faced with the COVID crisis? Who wants can start?
Yeah, I can start.
Yes.
The immediate biggest challenge was to grasp what was going on and what has to be done. And that was on several different layers. Of course, on the technological layers, we had to make sure we had enough so that Zoom didn't crash when all of a sudden most of the world were going online on Zoom or some other platform. And so that was sort of the infrastructure work we had to work with. And then we had to learn those who had never used an online e-learning tool to do it, basically. So that was an enormous challenge for the pedagogical unit at universities, I'm sure all around Europe, to quickly educate the teachers that was going to educate the students. And then now we're moving into, like I said earlier, we're moving into a situation where we need to improve what we are actually doing. A lot of shady work is going on with regard to teaching quality or learning quality. So that are the biggest challenges right now, as I see it. And of course, we have to we have ticked them off one by one. From a technological point of view, we are up and running with our system. It is still difficult to get hold of more servers, so at least the video streaming service we use at our university is still lacking behind a little bit due to a server hall in Stockholm that's not been able to acquire the right amount of servers, physical servers. But Zoom, for instance, is run on virtual servers, so it was very easy to expand that capacity for Sweden and Scandinavia, at least. I guess it's holds for the rest of the world. So those are the biggest challenges right now, and how we have worked with them.
Okay, thanks. And so yeah, elaborating on that example from Professor Alfredo, I also heard before you were talking about the fact that educators sometimes were missing some training. So like, for example, like, would you also want to elaborate on like what was missing from the educator side? So like, what do you think was the missing knowledge or skills?
Okay. This question of the quality of open and distance learning, I was this weekend taking a look at some of my old courses. One of them was precisely quality of open and distance learning with very old friends from KU Leuven and other universities. And this question comes from many years. So there is a concern about quality of e-learning or virtual learning or online learning, open and distance learning, like it was called many years ago. But the point is that it's not the same thing, it's different. So you really have to take into consideration the engagement of students, because if you put it online and you put videos and recorded sessions, you cannot engage students. You have to communicate with students. You have to make the proper scheduling of the classes and do something that it's not spoken very much, but it's fundamental for online learning, which is the person that looks at the behavior of each student or each learner. Because I've learned that from the professional development, from the lifelong learning courses online. Everyone is different, and everyone needs to have some kind of mentoring or tutoring or what we had a project just to define this function, which was coordinated by the Vienna University of Technology, which was called facilitator. You have to have a facilitator, someone that facilitates the learning for online. And all these things have to be learned and have to be trained. For instance, I remember just a story. A master at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, where each learner had to sign a contract with the school for attending the course, but the wife or the husband had to sign the course too, because they were going to spend so much time working online that the family had to agree. So you see, there are things that we don't consider usually in the face-to-face, but you have to consider online, because online is perpetual, it's 24 hours a day, and people use it in different ways. And the way you have to prepare your teaching and verify the learning, or at least follow the learning of each student, is different from what you do face-to-face. And this preparation is something that was lacking. And we have these webinars, of course, made by EDEN, by EADTU, by ICDE, which is International Council of Distance Education. They had a great webinar about assessment, what Frank just mentioned just some moments ago. I mean, these questions are very important, and it was very difficult to handle when we have to deal with colleagues that are not minimally aware of that the pedagogy that they use in the face-to-face is not the same you use in online.
Okay, thanks. And so, and related to this, we actually also have a question from the public that they ask, like, this is a question for everyone, like, do you think that university are ready and open to support the educators in gaining these new necessary skills, like to improve their digital delivery, or?
Well, I can answer some of that. I mean, like in any change or innovation that is happening, whether it's in industry, in media, or in health, even you have the universities that are the front runners. And for sure, there are a number of universities that are leading this. And if you look at those, I mean, the core is always supporting their teaching staff by investing in an instructional design team or a learning design team, training the teaching assistants in that, and providing the necessary support structure. The ones that are more behind this, I mean, they still believe that it's mainly a problem of technology, which it is not. I mean, it's a problem of methods and pedagogy. And that's where the real teaching comes forward. And what always strikes me in education and research in education and online is that we have done 20, 30 years of research in what is the best ways of doing it, but we apply so little for it. So if we start by applying what we know already, we will make a big step forward. And like I said, I mean, the ones that will be building the universities of tomorrow are the ones that are seeing this as the vision for their education.
Okay, thanks for the input. And okay, and then another question that we had still for you, Frank, that since you probably like you deal with several different universities, still elaborating on this, do you think that then the online infrastructure that university had was an issue? You kind of mentioned now that it's more on pedagogy.
Well, of course, I mean, you have to have everything right. I mean, you need to have the right pedagogy, you need to have a sufficiently scalable infrastructure. And some universities were not ready for this, and because this took them by surprise. And if you suddenly have to move thousands of students online, it may not be sufficient to work with your own IT infrastructure. But also there, I think, I mean, universities have quickly taken the emergency measures by renting or leasing capacity or fixing this. And at least in the 14 universities that we have had, we didn't see any problem with the infrastructure. Also because, and this was a very smart by many of the teachers, when they had online sessions, they always had a plan B or a back channel. And this was a guidance we gave them. If you organize a course on Zoom or Teams or whatever, make sure that you have a plan B communication channel in case you have capacity problems or whatever. And we had to use that in a couple of ways, but at least it made clear that when you use technology, I mean, don't think it will always work. Make sure that you think about contingency plans and things that need to be in place, not to leave 100 students online waiting for something they don't know what's going to happen next.
Thank you very much. Still on this topic, so it affected a lot the transition to online was not done right by everyone. course, but there are many different fields of engineering, and we have two people from the background of more computer electrical engineering and one civil engineering. Do you think there are differences in this field? Are there engineering fields that are easier to move online and others that face more problems? Whoever wants to add to this.
Yeah, I can do that. But yeah, I mean, the ones that require labs are probably more difficult because there are a lot of people working on remote laboratories, and there is a network, a European network, several conferences on remote laboratories, and those engineering areas that require labs, that probably it's a problem, but it's not impossible, and it is something that has to be worked out, and taking this opportunity of this situation, because I think that later we'll talk about the future, because I think universities will have to handle this. But taking advantage of the situation where we are now, it's just a question of seeing where these people are doing. I've seen incredible laboratory experiments made virtually with simulation techniques and with immersive reality and augmented reality that you can reproduce at home and you can work with it. So, but some engineering areas require more laboratory work than others. I think that's the only difference. Everything else, I think it's similar.
Right. In case you don't have anything to add to this question, Frank, you have something?
Yes, because yeah, I'm sure that it's different for different types of engineering, but it also leads to the question on how we organize the lab work today. And because if you take a scenario where you say, look, as long as we don't have a vaccine against COVID-19, we will have to deal with this. And so some of our university partners are looking at rescheduling the courses and the labs so that the likelihood of the lab work to be done in a low COVID contamination period, which allows travel, is more likely. So this is also impacting how we organize the labs and the things. So, and the important part is that, I mean, there can be solutions for all of this, but we really need to think with a blank sheet of paper. And I can say that, for instance, again, in the area of international students, one of our partner universities made a deal with other universities in the world who had similar labs, that students could do lab work in their labs. And they're still working on that. But this is really where you see that collaboration between universities becomes really meaningful for education, because we have all this infrastructure. Why not share it?
Thank you very much. So we already yeah, go ahead.
If I can say something, there is a very good in Germany, a very good medical school that it's made precisely on the cooperation of several universities to recreate the virtual situations for medical students, and they are doing it very well. We can learn with them. So this is why I'm saying that this cooperation with others and with associations and with other things that have already been done and are being done are very useful. I was just reading right now a news from a famous online blogger about what is happening with Cambridge. Cambridge next year won't have any face-to-face classes. They have decided that all will be online. So if they can do it, of course, with the proper structure, with the proper training of students, the students and teachers, I think everyone can do it also. So that would be my comment about this question.
Yeah. I guess we all agree on that, that we need to implement the learnings and the research that has been going on for many years in the field. So yeah, we also answered one of the questions that was from the audience, exactly about this topic of laboratories. And I would like to ask Fredrik, how do you think that this crisis affected learning for the students? And if you think that the current generation of students will be affected, like having a knowledge gap, or in other ways?
No, I don't really think so. We see from the period of March to June a slight decrease in the actual sort of performance of the students if we compare to last year. But that's 2% unit from 70% to 68%. So that's a very slight decrease. It depends on a lot of stuff. From that point of view, I don't think that this will be a lost generation, that are lost have a lot of knowledge. We will, of course, adapt, and the hardest part still is the lab situation to come up with a good solution there. And the learning of the students, what we see amongst our students is that we had a survey going on with the students, and they, to some degree, thought that the quality of the online teaching was lower than the normal teaching that they had just sort of the weeks before. And of course, that we have to work with to increase our knowledge on how to do online teaching. But we also saw that some students have a problem with lack of motivation when you go online. You sit alone in your room trying to study without a social context. And if you're sort of prone to procrastination, it's of course not a good thing to be all of a sudden tossed into a situation where you basically can watch Netflix all night and get up whenever you want. So it is stressful for some students to find new strategies how to cope with this very new situation. In Sweden, we have for a long time seen a big difference in performance amongst distance education and traditional university education. I'm pretty sure we see that in other countries as well. So now it's a sort of a great opportunity to see if the difference in performance in these two classes of education is dependent on the fact that there are different kinds of students that are attracted to the two different modes of education. And now we all of a sudden have campus students who have actively chosen to go on campus that are sort of tossed into online learning. So it's really, really exciting to see if we will have a massive drop of performance to the normal online course level. But I do not think we will see that. And I hope we don't see that.
Thank you very much. Frank, you have something?
Yes, I would like to add an important observation into this, because I said that in our program we focus a lot on active learning in companies and so on. And one of the things we kind of noticed immediately is that well, all the companies and organizations in the world are also impacted by Corona, and a lot of them are now switching to remote working and remote collaboration. And so they want their new employees to be able to work in such a setting. And that kind of, when we discussed about this with the students, it becomes clear that, yes, I mean, this is a big change, but it's not a change of throwing away time, because they learn new skills to collaborate and communicate online, work in teams across the world. And that's what the employers need. So I think it's, well, it's a good thing with a bad thing. They develop non-engineering skills, which are the personal skills, but maybe those are even more important at some point.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So also on this topic, I'd like to address this question to Alfredo. How did the situation impact evaluation of the students that are currently studying and getting their evaluations online out of a sudden? Do you think there is a big problem with this, and what solutions are there?
Well, I addressed the issue in the 2 hours ago, but in any case, I think the what happened with, at least with most of my colleagues, was they just decided to make the evaluation based on essays and I wouldn't call homeworks, but research on this and work solving this big problem, etc. It was, let's say, the solution that most of my colleagues used to evaluate the students. What the school did was postpone the exam period, and they are starting today, precisely today, they are starting the examination face-to-face. Of course, we have to stay, or the students have to stay 2 meters or 3 meters apart, but basically it's the same as before, with exams as before, because they decided to postpone the exam period. But most of my colleagues didn't want to find online assessment modes. And believe me, this is done in many universities. I was watching EduTech in Asia, which is a big consortium of using technology in education, and it was about assessment. And one of the universities that was there was the Monash University from Australia, which I knew already. But the numbers are incredible. They have about 350,000 exams to handle online, and they do it. There are methods to do it, and they do it. So there are, how do I say, lots of examples that can show that it can be done online. Of course, this question of which one is better, the online and the face-to-face, this is a very old, there used to be a portal that was about precisely the topic of which one was best, and there were arguments back and forth. Personally, I think learning is learning, and you have different tools, and all of them work if the teaching is done properly.
All right, thank you very much for your thoughts. So right now we are a bit past halfway through our panel. I just want to remind everyone watching this that you can still ask questions on Facebook and YouTube. And before moving to the topic of more of the future, I just have one small question from the audience, which is, what is your opinion on the reduction of the tuition fee in full online semesters? Any of you would like to comment on this?
Yes, let me comment on that. Because what InnoEnergy has done is we have reduced the tuition fees with 50% if the semester is fully online. And that's because, of course, we don't want to lose the students. We want to keep them. And we want to also know that in this transition period, this is not always meeting their expectations. So this is more like to make sure that the student experience that is not optimal is compensated. However, on the other hand, and that's a debate we have to have at all the universities, if you look at the real cost of education and also the cost and the effort that is needed to make high quality education, somebody will have to fund this in a better way than today. Because if you look at how the funding works at the university, I think education is at a very low level of funding and does not always allow us to do the right things. So should it be the students that pay? Not always. And but for the moment, I mean, until we have a better running rate on this, we reduced the tuition fees. but it's not sustainable, because if we do this 2, 3, or 4 semesters in a row, I mean, or universities will get in financial troubles, and we will just disappear, and we don't want that.
I can comment. In Sweden, we don't have a tuition fee, so we haven't had to take that into consideration. So I really can't tell what my opinion are. It seems that the government has changed the rules for the student loans that are taking, so they're not obliged to pay them back in the same rate as usual. So there is some adaptation to the COVID situation, but it's not on this scale.
If I can say something about it, I think that you have seen the quality will probably motivate the decisions of the universities and the governments. But of course, in those countries where you have to pay, like for instance in the United States, you have Stanford saying we won't reduce the fees, because if you want the diploma from Stanford, it doesn't matter that it's face-to-face or online, you have to pay. But at the same time, Stanford has done other things, for instance, for the area that I know well, which is the continuing professional development, lifelong learning, and let's say training for active engineers. They placed, some years ago, they placed all their courses online. All their courses from Stanford are online for free. But if you want a certificate from Stanford, you have to make the exam, and that costs money. So models will evolve, as far as I know, as I understand. Models of the universities will evolve a lot, because in any case, the university is the only one that can ensure that the person with a diploma or a certificate has the right competences. And that has to be paid either by public money or by private money from the companies, but somebody will do that. But ensuring that the universities are the ones that society recognizes as the one that can ensure the competences of the graduates.
Okay, thank you all very much. So if anybody has more inputs, I would move to, as Joao mentioned, more the impact that all these crises will have on the future. So first, a question again to all of you who wants to answer. So how do you think that this COVID-19 crisis that happened will impact and change education in the years to come, so when the pandemic will be over? Predict?
Yeah. Of course, we've taken the quantum leap that I talked about earlier of going 3 to 4 years into the future on the digitalization. So that we have to take care of, and then to put a real effort into actually becoming good at doing online education and not just having the technical platform for it. What we've seen in Sweden, and I think other countries as well, is that in April there was the application for the program starting in September, and we saw a change in the interest amongst the young people, what kind of programs they were going for. And we see that nursing and medical doctors has a sharp increase. To some extent, engineering also increased, while other professions like teacher actually had a decrease. So what we can say is that a changing world will also have an influence in what the youth want to learn and study. And we see that going into nursing, medicine, engineering indicates that the youth actually want to help and solve the problems of this world. So that I think we have to take into account, and this of course will change more times than just now. And universities of course has to have a have to expect this from future generation of youth coming into university, that their interest in education and the specific topics they are interested in studying will change. And we have seen a lot. There was a discussion earlier about Alfredo about the value of a diploma. One could argue that the value of a diploma perhaps is not as high as in the future as today, and people want to have skills, and the skills will be valued more than actually a paper stating that you have the skills, and being able to show the skills perhaps by being active during your year as a student. And we see that in really hot areas like computing today, that computer students are actually, it doesn't matter if they have a diploma or not. They get a job during their studies, and they're sort of yanked out of their education after 2 or 3 years, perhaps 4, on a 5-year program. And that's a problem for us as a university, because we will lose a lot of students. But of course, it's an asset for the company that can cherry pick the skills as they go through the system. So in the future, I would say that the university has to be open, that the value of a diploma is not as high as it is today. And then you have to really start asking yourself, what is then the value of higher education? If you take the example with Stanford earlier, what would, if the Stanford diploma, of course that's an extreme case, but if that all of a sudden wasn't worth anything, and Stanford were giving away their courses, what is Stanford then? But we as a university has to look into the effect of the digitalization, and perhaps different business models on how to, what are we really offering our clients, and who are our clients, and have that kind of thinking and discussion internally. You see a lot of, you don't see a lot of that in, at least not from the horizon I can overview.
Thank you. Wanted to add?
Yes, I certainly agree with this, because one of the things that COVID has created is a focus on education and how we teach, and mainly how the students learn. And it forces us to change, because by moving into a lot of the emergency remote teaching, and I call it Zooming and MOOCing, we hear a lot from the students. Well, I mean, it's replacing the classroom by a Zoom does not help me. We really want to learn in a different way. And that is where the change will come, because you want to learn to have a good job and to have a good life, not to just repeat what has been said in an ex cathedra course. And that will be a big change for a lot of our faculty staff, because I mean, for ages, education has been focused on a lot on this in the university lecture rooms. And when I see the reactions of our students on this whole change, it's mainly this: what is the value of coming here? Why would I join a program in InnoEnergy or in any university if I can follow the same course online from Stanford for free? And in some cases, it will be the diploma, but I'm sure, I mean, I'm absolutely sure that the main driver will be how will it shape and impact their future career-wise and in the job world. And that's the challenge we're facing, preparing the young generation to have the jobs that have impacts in the future.
Okay, thank you. Oh, yes,
if I can add
please.
something, just to say that, in fact, I expect the future universities to be in a blended mode, because online has several advantages that I think they are appreciated by everyone. I talk about accessibility. I talk about the question of the personalization with micro modules and personal pathways to get their skills, or I prefer competencies, including skills in the competencies. I think also that there's a lot of clarity on online. You have very clear outcomes. I mean, when Frank was mentioning about the question of why am I here, the learning outcomes is something that will be more and more motivating the definition of the teaching, and therefore the learning. And the fourth idea that I have is the flexibility, because with the online you have much more flexibility than on the face-to-face in terms of scheduling, in terms of pace of study, everything. And the last one is independence. I think that the learners in the future will, some of them will prefer online learning because they will be able to choose whatever they want and aggregate several competencies that will be useful for their lives. And that will continue throughout the life, not just 18 to the 21 years. I think it will be a real lifelong learning that it's only possible with an online approach.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you for your input. So I heard from like all of you saying that, of course, the difference will be also in outcomes. And elaborating on what you, Alfredo, just said, I wanted to ask you, there was also another question that we had. You also said that probably not only what is delivered, but also the methods, you think they will change. So like you think that in the future anyway, universities will move more to an online environment, or not? Alfredo, yeah.
It's for me. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I think any of us would answer, because I understood that all of us have experience and interest in what's going on. So personally, I think that some of the universities will use more online because it's probably cheaper on one hand, and also because this question of the pandemic will not go away very soon. I mean, until, I'm not talking about the vaccine or anything. It's just the fact that the online option is on the table, and that was not on the table 3 months ago, and now it is. And I think if you know something about learning styles, I think lots of students prefer the online learning than the face-to-face for personal reasons and for habits, for even living outside or away from university. So we'll see. I think a blended mode will be frequent in all universities.
Yes, Fredrik. Then also we have inputs from
Yeah,
Frank.
I totally agree that we will go blended after this. We already now have a discussion on, because we have some really big courses with 300-400 students. We'll cram them into big auditorium and try to teach them algebra and derivatives and whatnot. And of course, that doesn't work. I mean, if you're a new student, new to university, you're sitting in a big auditorium with 300-400 other people, you don't raise your question and tell the lecturer, hey, I didn't get that. So those courses, we will still have them, but they will go into some other form of delivery that is much better suited for that big volume courses that we for economical reasons need to have, really. So I think that's I totally share that we will go blended after this.
Frank, you also had inputs.
Yes, and what I wanted to say on the topic and the semantics of blended is that for specifically also for engineering faculties, blended will be more than combining online and offline. because it will also be blending disciplines in a more multidisciplinary way, which we started doing, but it becomes clear that if you have to deal with crises, that you need engineers, but you also need other people to come to the solution due to the complexity of it. And it would also be blending learning with working. We have a number of universities in Europe who are already doing this. You can spend a semester in the university and then spend 6 months working, come back. So this additional flexibility in building blocks and blending working with learning online and offline, and with taking studies from another discipline or working on another discipline, is what I believe will be the predominant direction for the future.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Interesting. And so still on a similar topic. At the very beginning, we had I don't remember from whom, but we mentioned that there have been a lot of changes now, that it's important to not just let them fade into dust, let's say. So what do you think are the changes that we should, let's say, actively act for, make them permanent, even after the pandemic will be over, not to just lose the work that has been done? And anybody who has inputs can answer.
I go ahead, Frank. Go ahead.
No, well, one of the things I wanted to say is that a lot of the universities will realize that they need to train their staff for learning and teaching. Because I know a lot of places where a young postdoc starts to teach and they have not have any training or ample training. And when you look at the online learning activities, you need to really design this. You have to think about user experience, about interaction, all up front. You're not just reading from your slides, but you need training for that. And for me, this is the big thing that has to be put in place. I mean, if we want to do this better in the future, let's focus on making our trainers and our teaching staff excellent by giving them the right tools and knowledge to teach. Also, teachers have to learn. And that's maybe sometimes a difficult challenge to achieve.
Alfredo, you also wanted to say something?
Say that in terms of what we are, let's say, expecting, is that we will have more and more universities and institutions working on the new approaches, because I think that students will force the change. They will ask for possibility of using online materials, possibility of doing of skipping classes and staying at home and seeing the recorded session, etc. So I think the change will happen, but it will happen mostly, from my point of view, from the part of the students that will be more demanding for that option, because I think there will be a lot of students asking for that option.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I mean, as within any change program, you need to have all the stakeholders on board to make this change happen and make it stick. And we focus a lot on the teaching staff, but in the end of the day, we should also think about the students, about the parents who are concerned about the future of their students, and also the university management, because very often, I mean, we see a lot of good teachers with real motivation to change things. But if you don't have the support from the university management and it's not written into the strategy, it can be a lonely fight. So I think by beginning to address all the stakeholders in what we call education or higher education, this should really be helpful.
Thank you very much for your opinions. We will have one final question since we are almost finishing. I'm going to address this question to all of you. I'd like to hear each of your opinions, and it connects a lot to what we can expect from the future. So my question is, what is the importance of on-campus education? And will universities become 100% online at some point, or is the on-campus experience still a very important part of that process? So maybe we can start with Fredrik, and then.
I think it is a very long time until we are totally rid of the on-campus, because at least right now, the bulk of the students want to be on campus. They tend to go to the big universities because they want to be with other young people, to have the student life, to do the thing you're expected to do when you're a student. So there will be campus education for a very long time. I'm pretty sure of that. But we see now a large increase of the number of students that are coming to university, and we will see an even sharper increase after the COVID situation of people that really has to do a career change because their old company where they work, they went bankrupt or something else. And these people are older, and they come from a much more diverse background than the sort of normal student population. And this group of students, I'm pretty sure, will be very happy with the offline campus experience. It will tie in much better with their life, where they are right now. They have a family, they have totally different settings than if you're 18, 19, coming right into university for the first time. So the short answer is yes, there will be both off and online campuses.
Very much. Frank, would you like to go next?
Yes. So, well, I mean, in answering the question, what is the impact on online campus? It will never go away, because I mean, there is an experience there. You meet people, you live things which are a once in a lifetime experience. But maybe the question we should ask ourselves, what do we mean by on campus? Because right now, I mean, it's very much restricted to the university building and life around the university. And maybe the on-campus experience should be or could be more diverse. And on-campus can mean on 2 or 3 campuses. I mean, today you already have programs in business schools that rotate amongst a number of campuses to give students an experience in Asia, in Europe, and in the United States. So maybe that's a concept to think of. Should the campus always be in an academic geographical setting, or should it be expanded into companies, research organizations, and what to think about the concept of a pop-up campus? This is one of the concepts that we have been discussing in InnoEnergy, that if flexibility is required due to COVID, but also because it is better, well, why not have pop-up campuses where you have sudden, very intense weeks where you bring everybody together and then they go away again? So for me, it's more what is the campus of the future, but it will not go away, never.
Frank,
Yeah, I think that it will not go away. I agree with Frank and Fredrik. It's going to be there for several reasons. It's going to be there, even if it is just temporary or periodical, the meetings, but it will happen. And lots of students like the group work and the interaction with the colleagues and with the professors, and that is mandatory. I had a dean when I was studying in the United States, and when we were discussing these things, she was dean of education, and she said, "There's nothing that will replace the eye to eye between a professor and a student. Nothing. You cannot do that on the web." That's what she meant. I at a certain point, I believe her. There's nothing like the interaction you can have on face to face. So that I think they're on campus, depending on the extent, but the campus will still be there in the future.
All right. Thank you very much for your input. Thanks to all of you for your inputs on this question and the previous ones. I think we are having a very interesting discussion. We still had some questions, but we will have to wrap it up. For the ones that are watching the stream and didn't watch the full thing, it will be published in the future, so you can also watch it later on. Also, tomorrow we will have several keynotes and interviews about innovation in education. So we will also talk about some of the things that we discussed here and see some examples of specific universities and organizations already doing change in the education field. And later today, we will also have a podcast about the best educational involvement. So if you're interested, you're also welcome to tune in. And once again, thank you very much for accepting our invitation and for coming here. Also, thanks to everyone that made this panel discussion possible. And we hope to see you in the next sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a
Thank you.
pleasure. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Fredrik.
Bye.
Bye, Frank.
Bye.
Bye, João and Eugenie. Bye-bye.